So, is climate action just hopeless? It's a really heavy question, right? But it's at the heart of this fascinating Reddit post that argued we're all stuck in a kind of rational trap, one that basically dooms us to fail. So today, we're going to unpack that argument, look at the game theory that makes people so pessimistic, and then we're going to see why that whole pessimistic view might be completely wrong.
Okay, let's start with the core idea, which is summed up perfectly here. Climate change is a situation where losses are globalized, but gains are localized. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means the damage from pollution, the storms, the rising seas, that hurts everyone on the planet. But the economic benefit of polluting, the cheap energy, the faster industrial growth, that goes straight to the individual country doing the polluting. When you frame it like that, it really does look like cheating is always the winning move.
To really get inside this way of thinking, we need to see how it models the entire world as one classic and kind of brutal problem in game theory.
And that problem is called the prisoner's dilemma. So, imagine you have two countries, let's call them A and B. If they both cooperate and cut emissions, fantastic, no disaster. If they both pollute, it's a catastrophe for everybody and it comes even faster. But here's the twist. If country A pollutes while B plays nice and cooperates, A gets a massive economic boost before the disaster eventually hits. So if you're country A, you look at this and think, well, no matter what B does, polluting seems like my best option.
And when you follow that cold logic, you end up in a really grim place. It leads to this seemingly inescapable conclusion. If every country just acts in its own rational self-interest, the collective outcome is total failure. It feels like a logical checkmate.
But what if the game itself is flawed? This is the moment where everything changed for the original poster. As another user pointed out, the whole point of a true prisoner's dilemma is that defecting, or snitching, is always the better move for you no matter what the other person does. And when it comes to climate change, that's just not true.
And here it is, the critical flaw in the whole argument. If all the other countries are cooperating and cutting their emissions, your best move isn't to cheat and pollute for some temporary gain. No way. Your best move is to also cooperate so that you can avoid the catastrophe entirely. All of a sudden, that incentive to cheat just vanishes. Mutual cooperation becomes the best possible outcome for you, and that completely breaks the logic of the dilemma.
But the problems with using the prisoner's dilemma as a model don't even stop there. It's actually a pretty terrible fit for global climate action for a bunch of other really critical reasons.
First off, communication. In the classic game, the prisoners are in separate rooms. They can't talk, they can't coordinate. But in the real world, come on, countries are constantly communicating through diplomacy, through summits like the Paris Agreement, through all kinds of international treaties. They can make deals and build trust.
Second, this isn't a one-shot deal. The prisoner's dilemma is about a single isolated choice. Climate action is what's called a repeated game. It's played over and over and over again, year after year. And that changes everything, because it allows countries to build reputations and, more importantly, to punish other countries that decide to cheat.
Third, there are power dynamics. The classic model pretends you have two players with equal power. The real world, of course, is way more complicated. Huge economies, the US, the EU, China, they have enormous leverage. They can use things like sanctions or trade deals to pressure other nations to get with the program. And finally, maybe the biggest issue is that the economic premise itself is just getting old. The whole dilemma is built on the assumption that polluting is always the cheaper, more profitable option. But that's just not true anymore. I mean, the cost of solar power has dropped something like 90% in the last decade. The so-called gain from polluting isn't a sure thing anymore.
Okay, so if it's not a prisoner's dilemma, then what is it? Well, a much better analogy, one that lots of people in the discussion brought up, is a related concept that's way more accurate.
It's called the tragedy of the commons. The idea is pretty simple. Just picture a shared pasture that's open to everyone. Every single herder has a personal incentive to add more and more of their own cattle, right? Because they get all the benefit from their new cow, but the cost of the overgrazing is shared by everybody. And of course, eventually, the whole pasture collapses. Our atmosphere, that's our shared pasture.
And this model just fits so much better. You have lots of players, not just two. Everybody's actions are out in the open. And this is key. Defecting, polluting more, ultimately hurts the defector too. But most importantly, this model allows for rules, for regulations, for mutual agreements to be put in place to protect that shared resource. It's a hard problem for sure, but it's a solvable one.
Okay, so we've got a new frame for the problem. And looking at it this way, as a repeated game, a tragedy of the commons,
actually opens the door to some proven strategies for encouraging cooperation and building a system that can last.
One of the most famous and surprisingly effective strategies is called tit for tat. It's incredibly simple. Here's how it works. You cooperate on the very first move, and from then on, you just copy whatever your opponent did in the last round. If they cooperate, you keep cooperating. If they cheat, you punish them in the next round by cheating too.
Now, this strategy is so successful because it's built on 4 really simple but powerful ideas. 1. Be nice. Always start by offering cooperation and trust. 2. Retaliate. Punish cheating right away so it's clear it won't be tolerated. 3. Forgive. If they go back to cooperating, you do too. No holding grudges. And 4. Be clear. Your strategy is simple, it's predictable, so everyone knows the rules. And this isn't just some abstract theory from a textbook. We're seeing these principles pop up in real-world policy. Think about carbon tariffs. That's basically a tax on imports from countries that don't meet their climate goals. That's retaliation. Or international accords like the Paris Agreement, which create shared targets and accountability. These are all real-world forms of tit for tat.
And here's the really good news. Humanity has done this before. We have a track record of solving these massive global problems that seemed completely unsolvable at the time. Back in 1987, the world came together to fix the hole in the ozone layer with the Montreal Protocol, and it worked. Even at the peak of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union figured out how to cooperate on nuclear arms reduction. We can do this.
So, the real takeaway here is this. Framing climate action as some hopeless prisoner's dilemma isn't just depressing, it's flat out inaccurate. What it really is a complex, difficult, ongoing negotiation. It's a hard game for sure, but it's a game we can actually choose to win.
Which leaves us with one last question to think about. Is this challenge an unsolvable dilemma that has us trapped? Or is it a repeated game that we're all just now, finally, learning how to play? It seems like the answer has less to do with an abstract model and everything to do with the moves we all decide to make next.